Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome to Sights Less Seen, where I visit those maybe not so well known places you may not find in a normal tourist guide. Today, I'm at the National Museum of United States Air Force on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Now, I've been coming here since I was a kid. When I first got here, it had about a dozen planes in it, but now it has over 350 airplanes, not counting uniforms and displays and engines and missiles and everything else you could possibly think of. I love this museum. Now, it is on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but it is in an unsecured area, so everyone is welcome to come. The best part about it is it's free. However, it is a huge museum. It is an all-day event, if not maybe 2 days. So let's go see what it looks like.
The National Museum of the United States Air Force, located near Dayton, Ohio, is the world's largest military aviation museum. The museum has grown from a small engineering study collection to the world's largest military aviation museum and is a world-renowned center for air and space power technology. The museum is home to countless one-of-a-kind objects and includes more than 350 aerospace vehicles and missiles and thousands of artifacts. The museum began in 1923 when the engineering division at Dayton's McCook Field first collected technical artifacts for preservation. In 1927, it moved to then Wright Field in a laboratory building. In 1932, as a private museum, it was named the Army Aeronautical Museum. In 1948, it became the Air Force Technical Museum, and then, in 1954, it became public and was housed in its first permanent facility, Building 89, formerly used as a hangar, at the former Patterson Field in Fairborn, Ohio. As a matter of fact, I grew up about 20 miles from this museum, and several times when I was a youngster, I used to ride my bike those 20 miles to visit this place. Through the 1960s, Eugene Kettering, director of research in the electromotive division of General Motors, and a well-known philanthropist, led the project to build a permanent structure to house the collections and became the first chairman of the board of the Air Force Museum Foundation. When he died in 1969, his widow, Virginia, took over the project. The current facility opened in 1971. The museum has more than tripled in square footage since then, with the addition of a second hangar in 1988, a third in 2003, and a fourth in 2016. Additionally, in 2004, its name was changed to the National Museum of the United States Air Force. The museum's collection contains many rare aircraft of historical or technological importance, and various memorabilia and artifacts from the history and development of aviation. Among them is the Apollo 15 command module Endeavour, which orbited the moon 74 times in 1971. One of the 4 surviving Corvair B-36 Peacemakers, the only surviving North American XB-70 Valkyrie, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and the Boeing B-29 Superfortress that dropped the Fat Man atomic bomb on Nagasaki during the last days of World War II. You'll find not only U.S. airplanes, but innumerable planes from Britain, Germany, Italy, Russia, and other countries. Remember, I said there were over 350 planes here. In these 4 huge buildings, the museum is divided into 10 galleries that cover broad historic trends in military aviation. These are further broken down into exhibits that detail specific historical periods and display aircraft in historical context. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about what's in each gallery. However, I am going to name each gallery and tell you some of the more interesting exhibits in each. You can decide if you want to visit all of them or only a few. Now, visiting all of them will definitely be an all-day event and will entail a lot of walking. But since the museum is free, you can come back at any time that you want. The Early Years Gallery takes you back to a time when you could build your own airplane and teach yourself to fly, if you really dared, when you didn't need to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars for flying lessons, like I did. And when, good or bad, there were no regulations on flying or airspace rules. Behind this early wind tunnel, a large section of the museum is dedicated to pioneers of early flight, especially the Wright brothers, who conducted some of their experiments at nearby Huffman Prairie, just northeast of Dayton. A replica of a Wright's 1909 military flyer is on display, as well as other Wright brothers artifacts. The Early Years Gallery tells the story of the earliest balloon flights to the precursors of World War II, showcasing the development from simple biplanes to more complex single-wing planes, with some aircraft wearing bright colors. Some of the planes on display are an Italian Caproni CA-36, a reproduction Sopwith Camel, a SPAD-13, Northrop A-17A, a Martin B-10, and a French Berlioz monoplane, along with engines, weapons, and numerous other exhibits. In the World War II gallery are many pieces of U.S. Army Air Force and U.S. Air Force clothing and uniforms. At any time, more than 50 World War II vintage leather flying jackets are on display, many of which belong to famous celebrities who served in the Air Force. Others are painted to depict the airplanes and missions flown by their former owners. The displays include the jacket worn by Brigadier General James Stewart, yes, the actor, a leather jacket worn by one of a few U.S. Army Air Force pilots to leave the ground during the attack on Pearl Harbor, and President Ronald Reagan's U.S. Army Air Force peacoat. Some of the more known planes are the B-29 Superfortress, the famous B-24 Memphis Belle, a P-40, a P-38, one of my favorite planes, a Focke-Wulf 190, and the de Havilland Mosquito, which was made out of wood and was extremely effective as a fighter. Additionally, it has displays of weapons, aircraft engines, exhibits from the European and Pacific theaters of war, and a horde of other exhibits, such as Women in the Air Force and the Tuskegee Airmen. Some unusual exhibits include Disney pins on wings and Japanese balloon bombs, which carried firebombs and were released over the ocean in hopes that favorable winds would carry them over the U.S. and start huge fires. In reality, they started one or two very small, insignificant ones. Some of the planes on display in the Korean War Gallery include a MiG-15 and an F-86 Sabre. They look an awful lot alike, don't they? A Sikorsky YH-5A Dragonfly, along with weapons and engines. Exhibits include photos, video, and commentaries about the Korean War to include airlift, special ops, air rescue, medical evaluation, and information on the Air Force Reserve and National Guard missions in Korea. It's really interesting to see the transition from prop-driven fighters at the initial stages of the war to jet fighters. In the Southeast Asia War Gallery, you can view aircraft and exhibits that convey the U.S. Air Force's involvement in the conflict. Key air campaigns such as Operation Rolling Thunder and Operation Linebacker 1 and 2, the latter of which applied enough pressure on North Vietnam to compel them to an eventual ceasefire. Some aircraft include the B-52, which is still a threat in today's Air Force, an A-1 Skyraider, an F-111, a British B-57 Canberra, a MiG-21, and a Jolly Green Giant helicopter. Along with engines and weapons, there are displays and information about the war, secret operations, Laos and Cambodia, and even Bob Hope and his shows for the troops. The Cold War Era Gallery features aircraft that span the years of the Cold War and show how technological advancements of the era led to the advanced systems being applied in modern combat. The gallery's aircraft collection presents a broad range of platforms, such as fighters, long-range bombers, attack aircraft, reconnaissance, heavy airlift, and trainers. Some of the aircraft that you'll see are a B-1 bomber, a U-2 spy plane, and the SR-71 spy plane, which is still the fastest plane ever built, MiGs, and only the permanent display of the B-2 stealth bomber. Again, engine and weapon advancement displays are part of the exhibits. Other exhibits provide information on the Berlin airlift, top secret recon satellites, early days of the atomic bomb crisis, and the creation of the Strategic Air Command. The Missiles and Space Galleries are two separate galleries that house an assortment of missiles developed throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so on, such as the Minuteman and the Titan rockets, along with innumerable space exploration vehicles and equipment, Some other displays include a V-2 rocket developed by Nazi Germany, a history of rocket engine evolution, satellite launch and recovery vehicles, a space sled, which you'll have to visit to find out what that is, space food, and even a moon rock. Now, the Space Gallery has a full-size space shuttle exhibit that allows you to enter to see what the astronauts saw while flying this thing. There's also a Mercury, a Gemini, and an Apollo spacecraft on display, along with various astronaut equipment and suits. Some aircraft here include the X-24, built to study lifting bodies. Now, I wouldn't call it the predecessor to the space shuttle, but its design sure does look a little familiar. There's also the X-15 available for examination. The Research and Development Gallery offers you the opportunity to view the world's only remaining XB-70 and other aerospace vehicles. Now, the exotic XB-70 could fly 3 times the speed of sound. It was originally designed as a high-speed, high-altitude bomber, but rapid development of surface-to-air missiles brought an end to that. It was then used as a research aircraft for the advanced study of aerodynamics, propulsion, and other subjects. Some other aircraft are the Jet Jeep, the X-1 and the X-5, the X-3 Stiletto, an F-22 Raptor, and the Canadian Avrocar, an attempt to build a vertical supersonic fighter bomber. Now, I tell you, I'm not too sure how they thought this thing would ever go supersonic. I can remember watching news articles that were trying to pass this thing off as a hover car, a replacement to those four-wheeled things you see on the streets nowadays. I think the Presidential Aircraft Gallery is particularly interesting. Completed in 2016, this gallery gives you the opportunity to view an historic collection of presidential aircraft. Additionally, you can walk through 4 of them, including the aircraft used by President Roosevelt, which was the first airplane designated as a presidential airplane, President Truman's, President Eisenhower's, and President Kennedy's.
Well, that's the museum. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're ever in the Dayton area, you need to come visit this museum. As I said, I think it's one of the best airplane museums I have ever been in. Oh, by the way, this is an A-10 Warthog, one of the best ground support airplanes ever built. Built over 50 years ago, they're still flying. This is Steve. See you next time on Sights Less Seen.